I love playing bad games, and Steam happens to have thousands of them. Most of these are titles that are so bad, they'll make you regret the fact that you bought them, or even spent your time trying them out. Scams, cash grabs, even just poorly optimized projects. But if you want the real gems beneath the garbage, you're going to have to wade through the muck. But that's what I'm here for. Today, I'm going to be taking another look at 10 of the worst reviewed games on Steam. I chose different projects from among the mixed, negative, and overwhelmingly negatives. If you've seen this series before, then you already know that I try to give each game on this list a fair shake. I attempt to see both the good and the bad with each title. My intention is not just to trash all of these poorly received games, but to see where they failed and maybe where they succeed. Also to ultimately understand them, and if you want to understand why something is good, it helps to understand why something is bad. If you enjoy this video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe, as it really helps me out. You can also subscribe to my Patreon if you'd like to support the channel further and get some extra content not available on YouTube. Hey Dad, it's me, your favorite son, and today I'd like to once again talk about bad games. WWE 2K26 is a professional wrestling game developed by Visual Concepts. It was released on March 12th, 2026, and currently has mixed review status on Steam, with 952 total reviews, 48% of those being positive. Normally, when I pick games for the series, I browse through a list of negatively reviewed Steam games. I pick the ones that look interesting to me or that might have a bit of notoriety, and then try to get footage of them. I often end up covering only half of the games that I pick, because a lot of the games I buy won't even launch, or they're far too broken for me to even get footage of them. When this happens, I just don't cover the game and move on to the next one. In the case of WWE 2K26, I knew I had to talk about it immediately. If you're not a fan of professional wrestling or the video games surrounding it, the 2K series has been running for a long time. They were released yearly for a while, but after some absolutely disastrous launches, they took a break before immediately going back to yearly launches again. I got back into professional wrestling pretty heavily last year, and while I watch more AEW than I do WWE, I still ended up playing quite a bit of 2K25. It wasn't the best wrestling game that I played, but it was fun for what it was. It had a lot of content, but I would mostly describe it as sufficiently whelming, not under or over. 2K26 manages to return to those 2K20 roots, an incredible disappointment in just about every regard. The first and biggest problem that I saw with the Steam release of 2K26 is that it just straight up didn't work for me most of the time. When I first started the game, even in the tutorial, I just couldn't get the heavy attack to work. After restarting the game a few times, it did finally work, but then The Miz froze during our practice, so I couldn't continue it. I could get into the game, and sometimes it would even let me start a match. Ooh. But often the characters would get stuck in a transition after a minigame ended.
Not exactly what I was expecting out of this match tonight.
Most of the time, the game would crash when loading into a match, though. And even when I did get something like My Rise working, when I finally got into a match, I wouldn't be able to heavy attack or grab. Just to be clear, I don't have an underpowered rig or anything. There are a ton of reports that show the same thing happening to others. So not only is the game basically unplayable on PC, the monetization is incredibly predatory this time around, even more than usual. One of the newest introductions is a seasonal reward pass that is essentially a battle pass. You can unlock the free tiers just by leveling up and getting XP, or you can buy the reward pass and get the second track of rewards as well. The problem with this is twofold. First of all, a lot of the rewards in this tier are things that were included in previous versions of the 2K games. Basic characters that you would have been able to get for free by playing the game or that were unlocked from the beginning are now locked behind this pass. On top of that, you have to grind levels to unlock these rewards, which is incredibly time-consuming to unlock characters that the team originally just let you play out of the gate. Not only that, but the special edition pricing for this game is absolutely fucking insane. The base game is $70, but if you get the King of Kings edition for $100, you get 2 superstars, an emote, the Joe Hendry pack, which contains 1 superstar, and the Season 1 pass, as well as some in-game currency. But for $130, you can buy the Attitude Era edition with all of the same rewards, as well as Season 1 to 4 season passes, more currency, a few more superstars, an arena, and some Evo cards. Or you can buy the Monday Night War edition for $150, which includes, in addition to all the other stuff, season passes for Seasons 1 to 6, 3 more superstars, an arena, and a WrestleMania 42 pack. $150 is an absolutely insane price to charge for a game, especially when that game is going to require that you still grind out repetitive tasks to unlock more characters or pay to buy skips. Fans pretty quickly found a way around the grind, but it was very quickly patched out because the team absolutely couldn't have that. I mean, they're actually fixing things that allow people to get more for less money, while the game straight up doesn't run on PC most of the time. The problem is that previous 2K games already had a ton of microtransactions, especially with the My Faction mode. But now introducing the Season Pass just shows that 2K is trying to milk every cent they can out of their audience. I wouldn't even normally talk about this game because I could barely get it to run, but honestly, after looking at everything, the predatory monetization, the ridiculous bugs on the PC version of the game, and the locking of content behind a paywall, it felt irresponsible to not talk about it. Alone in the Dark Illumination is a third-person shooter game developed by Pure FPS. It was released on June 11th, 2015, and currently has mostly negative review status on Steam, with 269 total reviews, 23% of those being positive. Alone in the Dark is a series that started in 1992. With humble beginnings, it is often considered one of the forefathers of the survival horror genre. The series has been through the ringer over the years, with some mediocre entries, an attempted reboot in 2008, and finally Alone in the Dark Illumination in 2015. While the original games in the series were survival horror, Illumination essentially attempts to turn the series into a Left 4 Dead clone. All of the fear, tension, and mystery is gone, and the game is now about action and killing as many foes as you can. High-intensity combat and objective-based levels that we can complete and use to upgrade our characters. There are way less puzzles and a much larger focus on just straight action. Not only is this antithetical to the series as a whole, the game itself is just a terrible implementation of the core design principles of the genre it's trying to recreate. Illumination can be played either with a party of others or alone. I played the game in single player mode because my friends normally don't let me subject them to this level of garbage. At the start of the game, you're allowed to select a character class. Each class has different abilities and weapons. I selected the Hunter because it was the first and basically the easiest class to use. The Hunter has access to a magnum weapon that has infinite ammo and an automatic rifle that you have to pick up ammo for. Each level of the game has different objectives that you have to complete. The first level has you seeking out a bunch of different lengths of cable to try and get a generator running for a safe room. Getting into the safe room completes this level and gives you some experience that you can use to select new traits, which increases the damage of your guns, your health, stamina, etc. The combat itself in the game relies on light, hence the subtitle Illumination. All of the enemies in the game can only be damaged when they are covered in a strong source of light. There are tons of light sources around each map, street lights that can be activated, lights in buildings that can be turned on, etc. We can turn these lights on and they'll often burn out after a while, but it seems there are some fixed points of light that never go out. There's only a few different types of enemies. The main fodder type of enemy with lower health, and they often get stopped at the edge of the light. There's a stronger enemy which can shoot piles of poison at us. There's also an even stronger enemy that rarely appears and takes a ton of damage. The whole game is extremely clunky and easy. We often just have to run and grab something on a level and then run back to another point to place the item. The only thing keeping us from doing this quickly is an annoying stamina bar that drains any action out of the game right away. The UI looks terrible, like a direct-to-Steam trash game that costs 99 cents and has negative reviews. It's just like stock buttons and a stock font. All of the animations in the game are terrible. The monster attack animations take forever and look so bad. The melee and falling animations look awful and chunky. All of the models are extremely basic and just reused over and over again. Even the second and third levels are just copy and paste versions of each other, different stretches of mines with the same buttons and environment. And I haven't even talked about how buggy this game is. Where you can attack and do damage to enemies seems to be very inconsistent. I got stuck on the first mines level a few times because the game didn't spawn enough batteries to complete the objective. When I got to the third level, I made it all the way to the end, but I couldn't open the pump room because the entire area was bugged and wouldn't let me interact with any of the items there. This game is just incredibly low effort. It seems like it was made as a quick attempt at getting a game out with the Alone in the Dark title to try and capitalize off of fan anticipation for a series revival, while at the same time also trying to capture a new audience that didn't want anything that had come from this series previously. It's honestly the same old story as before. A company decides to use an old IP and forgets everything that brought that IP notoriety in the first place. The only thing that makes Illumination that interesting is that it's just so bad. It's especially shocking for something that got a decently budgeted reboot only 7 years before that, and by 2015 it was reduced to something that looked like it was whipped together in Unity. I would not recommend Alone in the Dark Illumination to anyone, ever. It's not worth it, not worth the time, not worth the money, not worth the pain. Painkiller Resurrection is a first-person shooter developed by Homegrown Games. It was released on October 27, 2009, and currently has mostly negative review status on Steam, with 511 total reviews, 24% of those being positive. Painkiller isn't really a franchise as much as some of the other games on this list. The main game was released in 2004, and all of the other games were either direct or standalone expansions of that original game. Resurrection was the third expansion released, and it was not developed by the original developer, People Can Fly, but Homegrown Games. They released a couple of other games on Steam, both with mixed reviews, Father's Island and Into the Dark Ultimate Trash Edition. Painkiller has a ton of issues. The story is about a hitman that gets killed during a mission, blown up by his own C4. He is then transported to Purgatory, where he is guarded by a being who wants him to take out the evil beings that inhabit the plane. I decided to play a bit of the first Painkiller for this video because I had never checked it out before. I wanted some sort of baseline for what I was comparing the game to, and I have to say that these two projects are night and day. While both games look extremely similar in terms of HUD and weapons, they couldn't be more different when it comes to design. Painkiller is a fast-paced first-person game. It has intuitive level design, interesting mechanics, a simple setup that leads to a lot of intense, emergent gameplay moments. The music is fantastic, and the environments and aesthetics slowly ramp up as the game goes on. Enemies are designed well and funneled to the player properly. Secrets are hidden enough to give the player a reason to explore. There's just a lot going on here, and it's clear that the game is oozing with style, but also a decent amount of technical prowess. Painkiller Resurrection has almost none of this. Any of the areas that it succeeds in are things that it has taken directly from the original game, and areas that it fails in are places where it has been forced to test its own originality. Most of the game is riddled with bugs, enemies not spawning in properly, pathfinding making the foes constantly get stuck in the walls, and the most egregious one, the game spawning me in below level 2 repeatedly at the start of it. The worst part about the game isn't even the experience-ruining bugs, though, it's the level design. The game just has no inspiration when it comes to the way that levels are laid out. The best example of this is that I completed the first level of Painkiller in 9 minutes, and it took me 25 to complete the first level of Painkiller Resurrection. Now, obviously, both levels are slightly different lengths, but there still shouldn't be that large of a gap. Plus, I was looking for secrets in Painkiller, and I was just trying to find the exit in Resurrection. In one of the first areas, you have to get out by slipping through this microscopic crack between the wall and this barricade. It doesn't even look traversable, which is one of the core principles of level design, ensuring that your player knows where they can and can't go. Obviously, I'm not advocating for yellow paint or anything. There are much more subtle ways of making level design clear and intentional. Painkiller does it incredibly well. Each level is laid out in a way that I immediately understood when looking at it. I know where I could go. I had areas of exploration I wanted to check out, and I was usually rewarded for that. Resurrection is filled with dead ends and frustrating areas that make no sense. As a whole, this game just seems entirely unnecessary. I don't have experience with the Painkiller series prior to this video, so I don't have the perspective that a fan would, but I can imagine that this game would look like a pale imitation to someone who genuinely loved the original. I would not recommend Painkiller Resurrection at all. It's not a good Painkiller game, and it's not even a good first-person shooter. This review puts it better than I ever could. Extremely noobish level design. Prepare to loose track in the big maps and get stuck inside a texture multiple times, over and over again. I mean, the fighting mechanics are nice and still work, but the maps are horrible. Both you as well as the enemy have a rough time traveling in this puke of sheet, bumping and sticking around not knowing where to go. Everest Real Climbing Simulator is a survival game developed by Fun City. It was released on January 21st, 2026, and currently has mostly negative review status on Steam, with 29 total reviews, 20% of those being positive. Everest Real Climbing Simulator is not real whatsoever, not just in its implementation of the game's climbing mechanics, but also in its liberal use of AI. In fact, the entire trailer for the game and the introduction videos are both entirely AI generated. The game that is presented here is absolutely nothing like the end product. Here are some comparisons, for example. The trailer shows racing with a bunch of other climbers, which isn't in the game because it's single player. It shows a ton of first-person shots, like one on a snowmobile, but the game is in third person. It shows a massive avalanche careening down a mountain, but the only snow falling in this game are these large, smooth circles that kill you if they crash into you. I guess it's like an abstraction of an avalanche or something, like a metaphor, you know? At one point, there's even like a picture of a climber's family, implying some sort of tragic backstory that isn't present in the game at all, and the top of the screen says, Daphne Zone. There's also like a ton of different title cards at the end of the trailer, and one of them just says Summit's Price, like that was the title the AI chose for the game, and they just never bothered to change it. The bottom right of the trailer does say not gameplay though, so I guess technically they're covered. The actual game is far less simple and impressive. The goal is to climb to the top of Mount Everest, which the game claims is the first ever one-to-one replica of Everest. Not sure how they're allowed to claim that either, but okay. The actual game itself has two modes. We can either play in entertainment mode or realistic mode. Entertainment mode allows us to use vehicles to travel up the mountain, and realistic does not. Both modes are incredibly broken and barely function as a game. The goal is to get to the top of the mountain either way. We have hunger and thirst meters, which both slowly decrease as we climb the mountain. We also have a health and stamina meter. Running reduces our stamina, but it climbs back up automatically. The hunger and thirst don't really seem to go down that much and can be refueled by grabbing some pickups around the mountain. It's not really that hard to do, and none of this is realistic or even entertaining. The mechanics begin and end there, though. Most of the reviews complain that they expected something more and in-depth from the gameplay. Maybe setting up camps along the way, some sort of gamification of climbing instead of just pushing forward. Somehow this game even actually has a photo mode, which is just wild to me that people would want to capture the beautiful sights of this game. The whole thing is just broken as well. There are enemies on the mountain, but they bug out all the time. The snowmobile is basically destroyed. The rating system is ridiculously hard to beat. Apparently getting up the mountain in 20 minutes is only a C rating. The game's biggest crime is just pure false advertising. This is the biggest problem with using AI for trailers and promotional material. You're giving people a wildly different idea of what the game is actually going to be. Most of the reviews also state that they expected the game to be something different. Some of the responsibility is on the consumer to do research on the product they're going to purchase, but it's also on the developer to properly present their game to the prospective audience. In short, avoid this game. Time of Shadows is a third-person action RPG developed by Skyfallen Entertainment. It was released on November 16, 2006, and currently has mostly negative review status on Steam, with 14 total reviews, 28% of those being positive. Time of Shadows is a very standard action RPG. The only thing that really sets it apart from any of the other Diablo clones of its era is that all 4 classes in the game are mages, and also that it's full of bugs and poorly designed. The game sees you playing a professor at a magic academy. We receive our first quest after a lecture on summoning demons, and we're told that a student has gone missing. We can find the outskirts of the academy being assaulted by enemies, and we find the student dead. The next quests occur as we head to other towns to get support for the upcoming assault on the school. The quests in the game are incredibly nothing. Even the mainline quests aren't interesting. Time of Shadows doesn't really develop a world that's intriguing enough to keep you interested. The cutscenes are also busted. Sometimes the dialogue desyncs with the subtitles and you have to just wait in silence for them to catch up before moving on. The game also weirdly uses a shaky cam for scenes that are not intense at all. The voice acting and dialogue is just so poorly written, I'm not sure how a lot of these lines weren't fixed during recording.
You see, our library's archive has a copy of the thesis about the nature of other existence. You might have heard of it. Well, my assistant, an idiot, gave it to Olagus.
The side quests are even worse than the main quests, though. In the first area, we can get a quest for us to find a book of spells that a student didn't return. This literally turns into a fetch quest where each student says the same exact thing, that they just gave the book to someone else. It happens over and over and over again. The game doesn't even play into the fact that it's a wild goose chase. That would at least add something. The humor is something that has to be created by the user in their head. The game never states it or makes mention of it, so it begs the question, does the game understand this is funny? What is the extent that Time of Shadows is self-aware of its own design? The magic system in combat is incredibly simple as well. We start out with a ton of spells, we can left click to use our main weapon, and we can right click to cast the spell that we currently have selected. These are basically just different elemental spells: earth, wind, water, fire, etc. Enemy spawns are way too frequent, and starting at the third area, which is like 30 minutes into the game, every square inch of the map is just covered in enemies. They swarm you very quickly, and your attacks are so slow that you just get mobbed and killed. The game isn't really balanced, so it just starts you out with a ton of health potions to compensate for the poor design decisions. On top of all of that, anytime that I alt-tabbed out of the game, switching back to the tab would reduce the FPS to like a single frame per second. I actually couldn't even finish the tutorial because of the bugs. I just figured out the game for myself. On the surface, this game isn't terrible. It's mostly functional. The game makes sense. It works mostly as a video game. There's just not really much reason for this game to exist. Like I said before, the only thing that really sets it apart is the class system. Being focused on different mages is a good idea, but the game doesn't do enough with this idea to truly set itself apart. In the end, it just becomes another Diablo clone from this era that doesn't have good quests or a story that grips the player and makes them want more from the game. It doesn't have an interesting combat system to make it feel distinct from other titles. It isn't polished enough to warrant spending a lot of time on it because it's pretty broken in a lot of different ways. Time of Shadows just isn't really worth your time or effort, even though it does function enough to get a playthrough in. Square Enix AI tech preview, the Portopia serial murder case, is an adventure game developed by Square Enix. It was released on April 23, 2023, and currently has very negative status on Steam with 476 total reviews, 15% of those being positive. This is a game that's been on my list for a while, but somehow every time I've made one of these videos, something else ends up replacing it. I finally decided to check this game out because I really enjoyed Portopia Serial Murder Case. If you don't know this game, it was released in 1983 by Enix. It is often considered the forefather of adventure games and establishing the genre. It was a big inspiration for games like Snatcher that would come soon after. It has a really important place in not just the history of adventure games, but video games in general. In 2023, Square Enix released this on Steam, an AI tech preview that demonstrates NLP, or Natural Language Processing, an AI technology that Square seemingly was trying to use to parse written words and program responses to the audience. Now, when I first saw this game, I kind of rolled my eyes because it seemed like this was Square Enix's attempt at introducing AI into their products. The company has sort of flip-flopped their positions on AI since 2024, first wanting to be aggressive with their use of generative AI, then toning it back, then saying more recently that they want AI to be handling 70% of its QA work by next year. But this tech preview isn't really using generative AI in the way that we think when we hear the word now. The images aren't generated by AI, and neither are the sounds or game logic. NLP essentially just processes language data from what I understand, and the system that this game uses is incredibly simple. Because it's so simple though, it showcases one of the most distinct issues that arise from using AI, trying to improve something old and somehow making it far worse in the process. In this tech preview, you interact with the entire game through text. You type messages to Yasu, your assistant, and have to solve the case of a recent murder. The problem is that the game just almost doesn't function. It's somehow worse than old text adventure games. You have to be incredibly specific and exact with the phrases that you type in. Type something even slightly off and you get generic responses from Yasu. He says, or maybe we should try and stay on task. It just doesn't work at all. The game claims that it's using AI to process information, but it's literally just an incredibly simple word parser. If it wasn't, you would get different responses based on what you said, and you wouldn't have to be so exact. Now, I understand that this is just a tech preview and it is free, but it's clear why nothing ever came of this. It's clear why they never moved forward with this any further, because it basically doesn't function at all. It somehow takes the original game, a title that came out over 40 years ago at this point, and makes it worse. If the game just had a simple word parser, then it could be like a text adventure game and we could have a list of prompts that we could give the system. The resulting product is just nothing. It's an attempt, so I can't really fault them at that. It got clear backlash and Square Enix rightly didn't move forward with it, assumingly. It's a bad game and a bad attempt at a remake, but also it's free and doesn't really affect much. Cinemaster Cinema Simulator is a simulation game developed by Overload Games. It was released on March 27th, 2025, and has mostly negative review status on Steam, with 138 total reviews, 31% of those being positive. This game is a standard simulation title. You run a shop, serve customers, purchase products, sell them, and keep everything running properly. It's in the vein of the incredibly popular TCG Card Shop Simulator. A lot of games have been released out of this wave of popularity, but not many of them have captured the same audience that TCG did. Most of them are quick cash grabs, made in an attempt to get a slice of that same audience by using the template that other games like it set up. Cinemaster does seem like a cash grab from what I can tell, but it isn't as blatant or terrible as some of the other games I've seen. It mostly functions as intended. You run a movie theater and you can buy the rights to show movies at your theater. Once you have the rights, you can select which times you want to show the movie. During the time surrounding these showings, people will funnel into the theater to purchase tickets. We have to print out their tickets for the seats they've chosen, and we have to get them any snacks that they order. Popcorn with a particular size, soda in the correct cup, and any candy that they want. They give us cash and head into the theater. We do this with every customer, trying to get them into the theater before the movie starts. We also have to run the projector before the movie starts and clean the theater. If this game is trying to be an accurate representation of how messy movie theater customers are, I don't think it achieves that, because theaters are some of the grossest places you could step foot into. I feel bad for anyone that has to work in a movie theater. You can eventually hire employees that will clean the theater for you and even stock the counters. The only real pain in this game is picking up the supplies you order from the next building over, but this is remedied as soon as you get to level 2 and can get an employee. If there's one thing that this game does wrong, it is its difficulty. There just really isn't any friction here. I won't say that it's terrible, but I never really felt pressured during the game, and the upgrades that I got just felt like they started playing the game for me too quickly. Getting employees that take care of 30% of your work should be a big achievement, not something that you do on the second day. There just isn't enough progression to make the game feel interesting. And even further, the game uses AI assets for the movie posters for every film that you can buy the rights to. I'm pretty sure that the sample movies that are played in the theaters are also AI, which is pretty lame actually. It also doesn't help that the theater just feels so empty. Some of that is because you're supposed to decorate it, but the design just feels a little lazy. There doesn't seem to have been a lot of thought put into making the building actually feel like it was supposed to be a theater. Other than the look and the progression, the game does work for the most part. It's not the worst thing I've played, but I don't think it really manages to capture that gameplay loop that other games in the genre do. I think that most people look at simulator games like they're inherently slop, but there's a reason why they work. There's a reason that a lot of people play them, and there is a subtle art to them. A good simulator game should pull you in and have you forgetting that you're playing a game. You should lose time because you're trapped in the game's loop. These games usually achieve this by slow but rewarding progression and an engaging gameplay loop that feels simple but not repetitive. Once one of these games starts to feel repetitive, it dies. It's lost the plot because if you feel like you're doing the same thing for no reason, you're going to turn it off. Cinemaster Cinema Simulator looks like a simulator game. It has all of the ingredients, but it doesn't have the foundation that it needs to hold it up. Many Buttons to Press is a flight challenge game developed by Eugene Zubko. It was released on January 6th, 2022 and has mostly negative review status on Steam with 32 total reviews, 31% of those being positive. Many Buttons to Press is actually a sequel to another game developed by Zubko called Press Any Button. While the first game was mostly based around story, the second game is devoid of most, if not all, story. The game states this as its goal at the beginning, though, to be antithetical to the first game. Many Buttons to Press actually sees us playing a new game that the character from the first game developed for us to be challenging. And it is very difficult. That's the entire premise of the game, to provide an incredibly robust challenge for the player to overcome. We try levels over and over again in an attempt to complete them. The controls are very awkward on purpose. We fly a small arrow around maps and have to steer it while also taking into account gravity and velocity. You do get used to the controls after playing for a while, but there's always a little bit of error in your calculations. The levels are laid out in laps, almost like racetracks. In fact, this game kind of reminds me of those old top-down racing PC games from the early 2000s. Each lap, a new obstacle is introduced to the track. Hitting obstacles reduces health. Some of them one-hit you and others just take a good chunk of your health bar. But you also lose health from hitting walls, so getting a perfect run is important. You can get lucky because some obstacles are more difficult than others, so getting spikes on the last lap, for example, is way better than getting it on the first. Now, I will say that I enjoyed the time I spent with this game, even though it was brief. This game wasn't really for me though, but I could tell it was well made. If the game would have caught me in a different mood, one where I was ready to hunker down and try the same level 50 times, then I definitely could have gotten into it. That being said, the game seems to have mostly received bad reviews because it wasn't really anything like the first game. I decided to play Press Any Button just to see the difference, and the two couldn't be less similar. This is by design, of course, but Press Any Button is a game where we are meant to play a game for a research study. The AI that's running the game quickly realizes the game is boring and starts to add mechanics as it learns about humanity. It's actually a really interesting concept. The mechanics are mostly simple, but it gets more complicated as the game goes on, and is a really unique idea in general. Press Any Button was also relatively successful, so I think that this sequel just really didn't meet fan expectation. It's certainly not anything like the first game, but I do think it's interesting for what it is. I was so interested in these two games that I decided to check out Eugene Zubko's third and most recent game, Night of the Lions. This game has a total hand-drawn art style, resembling doodles in a notebook. It's mostly a platformer with some interesting mechanics, but the story is where the game shines. The narrative plays out through notes and voiceover in the notebook, telling of a story of a girl who's dealing with the fallout of a war in her city. It seems autobiographical, as the developer had to delay the launch of the game due to the Ukraine war. It's a really touching project. It's incredibly raw and has a ton of heart-wrenching moments and lines. The game is also designed pretty well too. I would honestly recommend all of these developers' games, even Many Buttons to Press. While it is the weaker of the bunch, it will definitely appeal to some people who are looking for a really deep challenge. The other two games will appeal to most, and you should definitely check them out as well. hackSociety is an online hacking simulator developed by hackSociety. It was released on January 28, 2026, and currently has mostly negative review status on Steam, with 15 total reviews, 33% of those being positive. hackSociety is a very odd sort of game. It's sort of half idle game, half online MMO text simulation game. It's such a unique title that I was pretty enamored with it. In the game, your goal is to hack targets, level up your skills, upgrade your viruses, complete challenges, and increase your defenses. The game is surprisingly robust, though there is literally no tutorial, and it kind of takes a bit to figure out what you're even supposed to be doing. After some messing around, I did finally figure the game out, for the most part. Some mechanics remained a mystery to me until I stopped playing, but I got the general loop. Basically, you use the network page to get access to a bunch of different IPs and machines. You can then connect to these machines and attempt to use your viruses on them. These can be simple things like giving a listing of the system's stats, defense, and abilities. Once you know this information, though, you can connect to the system using a different virus, and finally steal crypto or money from them, or even connect to their machine and siphon their power. You can finally take the crypto you steal and sell it, getting cold hard cash in return. There are 3 currencies in the game: regular cash, HTC, and HUSD. HTC is a currency that's a lot harder to obtain than money. It can only be obtained through challenges, daily missions, daily logins, or by purchasing microtransactions. I honestly have no idea how you get HUSD. I got some of it from completing challenges, but I just felt like I randomly got it and then spent it quickly. HTC is used for just about everything in the game. If you want to upgrade your viruses, you need HTC and cash. If you want to upgrade your defenses, you need to use HTC and cash. If you want to upgrade your botnet to increase computing power, you need to use HTC and cash. You can get some HTC from spinning the wheel repeatedly, but you only get a certain amount of spins per day. There are a ton of other features in hackSociety. You can join clans and compete in some type of clan war. I didn't really explore this feature too much though. You can buy NFTs from the black market with HUSD and try to sell them for a higher price. You can complete contracts to hack specific targets. One thing that I never really understood though was the XP system. Despite playing for about an hour, upgrading almost everything and hacking tons of targets, I never got a single point of XP. It's possible that this comes from contracts or tournaments or something I just couldn't get access to, but I literally had no idea how to level up. Even the challenges and missions, when claimed, didn't give me experience. Aside from lacking a tutorial and forcing the player to figure the game out on their own, hackSociety isn't awful. The only thing really holding it back is its pay-to-win design. The game is free, so it makes sense that microtransactions would be woven into the fabric, but about an hour in, you just hit a wall and are sort of forced to pay to be able to continue on. It's an alright idea, and it seems like the few people that do play the game are pretty dedicated. If this looks like your kind of thing and you aren't worried about spending a few bucks or waiting to get some currency, then I think I would actually recommend it. Life Game is a first-person life simulation game developed by Old Town Entertainment. It was released on November 23, 2018, and currently has mostly negative review status on Steam, with 22 total reviews, 36% of those being positive. Life Game is an extremely ambitious idea with just a terrible implementation. The game attempts to be a sort of first-person Sims. You can create a family, you can create characters, and then you can play out their lives. You can get a job, buy a car, eat food, sleep, etc. I'm always interested in these types of games because when titles try to gamify real life, they usually become extremely addicting. When done well, it can be fun and even a commentary on the monotony of real life. It can heighten and amplify the routine that people endure every day. While I think Life Game is attempting to do that, I don't even think it ends up halfway there. The best way to explain this game would be to just give a brief summary of my time with it. I booted up the game and decided to check out the tutorial page, which was not an actual tutorial, but a list of videos made by the developer showing me how to play.
Hello everyone, welcome to the new family tutorial. For creating a family we are clicking.
Not a great start. I then decided to figure things out on my own, so I created a family and 2 characters. I went inside my house that I just purchased, but there wasn't anything to do. I figured it would be a good idea to get a job, but I couldn't figure out how to do that, so I walked into town to maybe find a place of employment that would hire me. The walking is very slow in this game, so it took me forever. And once I finally got there, I couldn't find buildings to interact with. So then I decided to go back to the tutorials to see if I could just quickly figure out how to get a job.
Hello Pixies, we are on another tutorial for jobs.
I realized that there is a phone in the game and you can get a job from there. I got the role of engineer, but unfortunately, I couldn't figure out where to go to start my work. It wasn't listed on the map and it wasn't listed on the job. So I decided to try and get a car, realizing that I could take a taxi from my phone. Unfortunately, the taxi was sent to my home, so I walked back home so as not to waste the money. But about 1 minute into the walk, the taxi left, so I ordered another taxi when I got there. This took me to the car dealership so I could finally get a car for myself. I then took the car on a joyride to maybe find some fun in this place, but I quickly flipped the car and could only unflip it by respawning it at the car shop for $50, and I didn't have any money. So I walked back home and quit the game. I do respect the ambition that this game has to create a living city and have the player become a part of it, a cog in the functioning machine, but it's just probably too much for the team that's making this. The HUD is absolutely awful. I'm not a big fan of the art direction, and if the aesthetics are simple, then I think the mechanics should make up for it in complication. Advanced mechanics should balance out the reason for the simplicity in art design. Life Game doesn't really succeed at its large ambitions, but I do respect it for trying. With that, we've talked about 10 more of the worst reviewed games on Steam. Let me know if you've played any of these games and how you feel about them. Were any of these underrated gems, or were they all bad? Let me know in the comments below what the worst game you've played on Steam is. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you want to support the channel further, join this list of amazing people right here, you can head over to my Patreon in the description. I also upload movie reviews of video game adaptations and monthly media reports where I talk about every piece of media I consumed that month. So go over there and check that out. I also recently launched a second channel called Your Second Favorite. The link to that channel is in the description. I've been uploading like smaller, more focused video essays over there that aren't just about one game, but more like concepts in the gaming industry or about game design in general. I'm really excited for that channel, so go check it out. I will see you next time. Bye, Dad.